Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm sure you figured that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. Welcome in, friends, Roman countrymen, lend me your ears. There's so much to talk about. And is it such little time? I don't know. I guess we'll find out before it's all said and done. I think we'll have a general idea of how well or poorly things are going in the not too distant future. There's a lot to get into. We have the Eagles to talk about. We have to talk about the Sixers, the Flyers, and the Philadelphia Union have a scandal on their hands in the midst of a very exciting time with the semifinal coming up this week, this Sunday. There's now a scandal that the organization finds itself embroiled in. So we're going to get to that on the show as well. We will not today be talking about the fact that apparently, reportedly, the Phillies have expressed interest in bringing back young Harrison Bader to the fold. We're not going to get there today. I don't think. We'll see. But I think as of right now, we're going to do Eagles, do a little talk about Los Sixers, specifically Paul George, the Flyers having things kind of in flux, and then the Union scandal will close that. Now, I will tell you that I took the time to try to figure out who the best person would be to bring on the show to talk about this whole Union thing, this whole Union story that was reported. And so on Friday, as of right now, on Friday, we'll have a guest on the show to kind of break it all down. We'll have like some initial observations, we'll call them here. And then obviously in the next couple of days, we'll update and we'll dive into it a little bit more on Friday and probably preview this weekend's game. But before we get there, we have today's show to worry about. And worry might not be the right word. I'm going to throw the comments on the screen here. We have a lot to get to and not a lot of time. What am I talking about? We have as much time as we want. We'll do it live. Speaking of doing it live, don't forget that today, later today, this evening, 6 o'clock in Northeast Philly, Snow the Goalie Radio over on WBCB, on YouTube, X, Facebook, the works. We will be all over the place. We'll be doing the show live. You'll be able to call into the radio station if you so choose. We got a lot of people calling in. It's pretty interesting. We got a lot of people calling in to WBCB, calling in to Snow the Goalie Radio. We love it. We appreciate it. We think it's fantastic. But we will be at the Chickies and Pete's on Roosevelt Boulevard, Northeast Philly. So if you don't have any plans tonight, or you don't want to cook tonight, or you want to come out and talk some puck, you are more than welcome to come join us. I would highly recommend coming out to join us at 6 o'clock. I'm going to throw this here on the old screen here for a second. Let's get the graphic. We have 3 shows this week over on the Snow the Goalie side of things. Most notably, we have Snow the Goalie Radio tonight. Let me take the comments down for a sec. We have Snow the Goalie Radio tonight, Roosevelt Boulevard, Northeast Philly, 6 o'clock. We have the Press Row Show on Thursday night as the Flyers take on the St. Louis Blues. And then, of course, on Saturday, Flyers Devils down at the Xfinity Mobile Arena as well. So do us a favor. If you want to come talk some puck, find the Snow the Goalie crew, or you can follow along online on all the Snow the Goalie channels, YouTube, Facebook, X, the works. It'll be out there. Going to be a good week of talking some puck. Now, we will talk some puck on today's show, but we have other things that we need to get to as well. Now, I'm going to go over to the comments before we get started. Ford, dropping a little Espanol this fine afternoon with a Feliz Miércoles. Chris Fried says within 9,000 steps of 10 million in 2025. Who else has logged 10 million steps in a year? I don't think. Could you really have done 10 million steps? That feels like a lot of steps. Let me figure out. Let's do a little bit of math. Hold on. What number day of the year is it? All right, so today is day 323. And so if we figure, all right, we're going to do a little bit of math here, which I know nobody agreed to on the show today. If I just do, how many million did he say? Did he say 1 million? 10 million. All right, so if we do 10 million, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All right, so we do 10 million divided by day 323. That means Chris Fried is doing almost 31,000 steps a day. Now, I'm not here to call Chris Fried a liar. I'm not here to call anybody who goes out of their way to watch the show live on YouTube, Facebook, and X. I don't go out of my way to call people liars. But you're doing 31,000 steps a day. What are you doing that you get to 31,000? I guess if you run a lot, I guess you could get a pretty high step count. And admittedly, mine is a relatively low step count. I am nowhere near 10 million steps for the year. I have no idea how many steps I'm in. So, yeah. Good on you, Chris. Good on you. Jay Grebby checks in. Good afternoon, Russell and Russettes. Hello, Jay. Thanks for being here. Let's see. Jay asks, when we talk Flyers, can we talk about who will end up being the odd man out on the wings when Martone arrives? Yeah, we'll get there in a little bit. We will. Connor Buss talking about needing to find a new sporting director for the Union. Allegations are damning. We'll get there a little bit later on. Chris says, will Russ be visiting the historic sports intersection of Cottman and Frankfurt Avenues before going to Chickies? I don't know. I'll go wherever the Waze takes me. Joe Fisher says, Russ, see the BS. The Mavericks fired their GM, and it reported they may be looking into moving Anthony Davis. And yes, he is linked to going to the Sixers. Do you think this happens? Well, one, no. I can't envision a scenario where the Sixers look to make a move for Anthony Davis. The only thing that maybe makes sense. All right, let me throw out a really crazy hypothetical that has absolutely no backing and no basis in reality. I just want to do a quick comparison. Okay, play this one out with me for a second. The Sixers have a little bit of an issue with the lack of availability of one Joel Embiid. Anthony Davis is older. Anthony Davis also has some issues with being able to remain healthy. Is there a scenario in which Anthony Davis could be traded for Joel Embiid straight up? The answer is no. I just did a quick trade over on Spotrac. That will not work. So here, I'll take you behind the curtain. This is all the magic that happens on the show with no producer, right? It's just little old me. So I went over to Spotrac because I know Spotrac says they have the best trade tool in the business. So let's go over here real quick. So I just did a straight up trade. Anthony Davis for Joel Embiid. They make roughly the same amount of money. Financial details. The Sixers would be a under first apron team after the trade has been completed. The Mavericks would be a first apron hard capped team after the trade. And so it says Dallas is hard capped and over the apron by $11 million. So I guess that means that we would need to send away more salary. Who can they send that would make sense? Cooper Flag. No. If we were to get them to send, I don't know why they would do this. Let's just say get off of the Klay Thompson money. No. You've exceeded the allowable incoming by $15 million. Okay, so that doesn't work. I don't think there's a trade. I don't know what the trade to be made would be. Could we do, hold on, let's play out. I'll do this one other way really quick and see if this makes sense, although I don't necessarily think it will. If it were a Paul George for Anthony Davis trade, it would still fail because the Sixers would fail, or they would exceed the allowable incoming by $2.4 million. So that wouldn't work. Okay. I don't know what to make of any of it. No, I don't think that the Sixers are going to get involved in the Anthony Davis sweepstakes. I don't think it's a move that would make a lot of sense for the team. I think even if you, at this point, right, if you're like Joel Embiid's health is such a question mark and going forward, the contract is so big, let's trade him for Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis has had injury issues as well. I can't envision a scenario where even the Sixers like look at that and say that makes sense. If you were going to look at like a deal of Paul George for Anthony Davis and say, hey, we believe in maybe running 3-guard lineups at some point. We believe in Kelly Oubre in a meaningful way. We don't need Paul George. I don't know why the Mavericks would make that move. So like, I don't see a scenario right now where it would make sense to have a Sixers Mavericks trade. If somebody wants to put something into that trade machine and let me know what makes sense, like we can have that conversation. I just don't see it. But then again, I haven't gone out of my way to like really try this every day, right? All right, let's see. Let's see. People are asking Chris what he does for work that he does 30,000 steps a day. Amadeus says if you live in New York City, it's probably easy. That might be true. Connor Buss here with a good point about the Sixers. Drummond becoming a 3-point demon in year 14 is certainly something. It is pretty wild. That maybe is like one of the coolest stories, I guess, to come out of this season so far for the Sixers is that Andre Drummond, this far into his career, has not become a good 3-point shooter, not become a lethal big man 3-point shooter, but like through 12 games this season, he's at 43.8% from downtown. His previous high in a season, because I know you were wondering, was his first season in the league, he shot 50% from downtown. I don't know how many 3-point attempts per game he had. I can't imagine it was much. Let me see. Let's go to raw totals here. He went 1 for 2 from beyond the arc as a rookie. Let's see. The most 3-pointers he's ever attempted in a season was 2018-2019. He went 5 of 38 from beyond the arc. That's 13.2%. He had another season where he put up 35, or sorry, the year that he was traded from Detroit to Cleveland, or he went from Detroit to Cleveland, 2019-2020, he went 5 of 35, which is a 14.3% clip. So him hitting 7 of 16 to start the year, 43.8%, good on you. Good on you, Andre Drummond. I mean, they always say, can't teach an old dog new tricks. I don't know if that's true. What I do know is true is that Andre Drummond is at least trying something new, and that old dog seems to have learned a new trick, and good on him for doing it. Now, it's really not the whole point of today's show, though. That's not really where I wanted to go with today's show. I actually want to start off a little bit of Eagles. We'll come back around to Paul George later on. We'll get to Flyers. We'll get to the union scandal. Let's go to the Eagles first. So you've probably been seeing this stuff going around social media. There are more and more jabs being taken at the Philadelphia Eagles. There are more pundits talking about the Philadelphia Eagles and how their offense isn't sustainable. I've seen clips going out from local media outlets where there are people getting brought on that say that Jalen Hurts flat out stinks, that he is unwilling to throw the ball into traffic or over the middle of the field. There are people who say that Tanner McKee would have been a better option at quarterback, yada, yada, yada. We talked about the fact that Derek Gunn put out the report about people in the organization not being happy with Jalen Hurts, and that Hurts is cognizant of the fact that he kind of has the team over a barrel, all that kind of wonderful stuff. All the kind of stuff that warms the cockles of your hearts, I'm sure. No, it doesn't. It's the kind of nonsense that continues to permeate the media landscape around the Eagles. And I have an actual problem and a concern. And my problem and my concern is, why is this stuff still coming out in the course of a season where the Eagles have started off 8-2? That's my problem. Like right now, my number one concern is, why is it that we keep seeing after every single game, many of them have been wins, 8 of the 10 games have been wins. Why do we continue to see anonymous sources talking to the media saying they're upset with Jalen Hurts? What is the end goal? And as an organization, isn't it pretty critical that you get everyone on the same page? We are not, under any circumstances, happy with anybody who goes to the media and expresses this opinion. Like, isn't the idea that you're supposed to be a very good culture team? Like, if we go back to the decision by the Eagles to not be on the field for the banner unveiling on opening night, right? And then Nick Sirianni said, I didn't even realize they were going to be doing that. And you go back to players saying, that was last year, this is this year, we're focused on this year. Even recently, A.J. Brown saying, thanks for the championship, thanks for the title, thanks for the ring, but I'm focused on this year. If that is the organizational mindset, we're not looking in the rearview mirror, we're looking forward. Why are there people that feel comfortable still going to the media as anonymous sources to throw the quarterback under the bus? What is the reason? Because you would think that if winning is really the ultimate goal, and winning is the thing that, people have kind of thrown at A.J. Brown's feet. Well, does he not care about winning? Does he care more about his own stats? If you're going to kind of hold his feet to the fire, shouldn't the same be applied to all of the anonymous sources that are running off to the media to complain? Because, isn't the goal to win games? You are 8-2. You are the top team in the NFC. You have a legitimate path to being the number 1 seed with home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs. Shouldn't the idea to be get your house in order and make sure that everyone is on the same page? It feels like this is going to be how the entire season plays out, that week in and week out, Eagles win games, and then it's just waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the scandal to come out, waiting for the anonymous quote to come out, waiting for a tweet or an Instagram post to be taken the wrong way. At some point, don't you just expect that adults are going to be adults, and that if there really are issues, and if there are issues with the quarterback, that they'll be addressed in the offseason? Isn't that what you should ultimately strive for if you're the Philadelphia Eagles? Because to me, that should be the most important thing. Why on earth does anyone feel empowered in this moment to go to the media and say, well, we would actually be a good team, even if Jalen Hurts were the quarterback. Well, it seems like he's afraid to throw the ball over the middle. It seems like he's risk averse. He doesn't want to throw into double coverage and allow his wideout to make a play. Like, why does this continue to happen? Why? You are essentially cutting your quarterback, your franchise quarterback, at the knees. I don't understand it. Now, I guess we can also kind of play the game of, should we continue with this idea that Kevin Patullo is solely to blame for the offense? Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I would say that to this point, it's been pretty well known, well documented, that Nick Sirianni doesn't just give full autonomy to his offensive coordinator, that a lot of the concepts that are installed week in and week out come from Nick Sirianni, and that is a collaborative environment. He doesn't just give up the play calling and the game planning on the offensive side the same way that he does for Vic Fangio, right? Fangio, by all accounts, has full autonomy over the defense, and that's probably for the best. But it seems like Sirianni still has some kind of influence on the offense. So I don't know. Is it fair to throw Kevin Patullo all the way under the bus? Probably not. Would I rather see Kevin Patullo get thrown under the bus than Jalen Hurts? Probably. But there probably is a certain percentage of blame that does go to the guy who has the ball in his hands every play in Jalen Hurts. And look, if it's a situation where you break down the all-22 film and you see that Kevin Patullo's offense is evolving over the course of the season and Jalen Hurts just isn't willing to throw the ball into tight coverage, well, then it is a problem. And then it probably does fall solely on the shoulders of the quarterback. But to this point, it doesn't feel like that's the case. So again, I just don't understand what is the ultimate motivation for a player or a coach or someone within the organization to go to the media right now and throw the quarterback under the bus. I don't get it. If you're going to try to win a Super Bowl, he's got to be a big part of it. And in fairness, he was the primary reason that they won the Super Bowl this year. I mean, it happened months ago. We are like, 9 months removed from a Super Bowl win. And people are talking about Jalen Hurts being the problem with the offense. I must have lost my mind. I just must be on a totally different planet. I have to be. It must just be me. I don't get it. I'm going to go over to the comments here, and then I'm going to get to one of the incendiary comments that came away today. Philly fan says, it's the fans' fault that the Eagles are the most scrutinized team nationally because we're hyper-focused on every little breadcrumb for national clicks. That is true. I think that there's definitely some truth. I think that the fact that very clearly Eagles fans live and die with every tiny little factoid, every little update, that probably does kind of push a national media narrative. I mean, what do we talk about every offseason? I talk about how stupid it is to track training camp stats. And finally, this year, J.J. Watt, of all people, ran with it about how stupid it is to track stats in training camp because you don't actually know what's being worked on. You don't know whether the concepts that are being installed by the coaches are set up in a way that it's supposed to be an advantageous, essentially let the offense get this rep, let them get the reception, let it all play out, or, see how the defense is going to react to a certain look. Like we don't know. So I think it's always stupid to track those training camp reps. But that started here. Like, I'm pretty sure that the training camp stat tracking started in Philadelphia. I think Elliott Shore-Parks was at the forefront of it. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. But, that became fodder for social media. Every single time that A.J. Brown has put out anything that's even remotely viewed as potential slight or a potential side-eye or a potential subtweet or whatever the hell you'd call, an Instagram post that's meant to be like that, people have jumped all over it. And if that's going to rule the day and that's going to increase ratings on a national scale, well, then guess what? The national media is going to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles as being a dysfunctional franchise. Now, I didn't play the clip on the show on Monday, but there was a clip from last week where Cam Newton went out of his way to say that the Eagles are like a dysfunctional ticking time bomb. And that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it all explodes. And then the Eagles went out and they took down the Detroit Lions, who Cam Newton said the Eagles would not be able to beat. So, we try not to give Cam Newton too much oxygen on the show because his opinions are almost as ridiculous as the hats that he wears. No offense to Cam Newton. He's a well-dressed guy. If you're into that kind of thing. I mean, he kind of looks like a guy who got dressed in the dark at a Salvation Army. And then he puts on a hat that Smokey the Bear would be proud to wear. He's an odd dude. A former league MVP who seems legitimately to be rooting for the downfall of players that are going to ultimately have probably a better all-time legacy in the game. Cam Newton never got it done in the Super Bowl, was never able to lead his team to the pinnacle of the sport and hoist the Lombardi trophy. It does feel like a weird disdain that he holds for Jalen Hurts, and he's just going to continue to double down on it until inevitably Jalen Hurts isn't a starting quarterback in this league. That might be 10 years from now, but whenever that is, I'm sure Cam Newton's going to be ready to dance a salsa or something on Hurts's grave as a starting quarterback. Until then, I don't know. Amadeo says, I'm tired of the drama. I'm also sick, which makes me more tired. Well, there you go. Let's see. Joe Fisher says they are winning, and yes, it's been ugly, but they're still winning, aren't they? Losing must not be real Eagles fans or people just jumping on the bad in case it happens. They're still winning. They aren't losing. I think it's must not be real Eagles. Okay. So the people who, okay, got it. Let's see. JH says Marcus Hayes must be feasting well on this drama. He 1000% is. Has to be. Like, has to be. I can't imagine. If the Eagles were to go on a 3-game losing streak, 4-game losing streak, Marcus Hayes will have a column ready. If the Eagles get bounced early in the playoffs, Marcus Hayes will have a column ready. You can guarantee it. That shit is like on lock. We know that's the case. Let's see. Philly fan says, blame Howie for allowing Nick to make Kevin Patullo the offensive coordinator. Should have gone out and found the offensive Fangio, not Mike McCarthy, but someone like that. I think that there's some truth to the idea that you should have gone out of the organization to bring in an offensive coordinator. Now, it worked with Kellen Moore. I think that there's like a pretty good chance that if you had brought in somebody with fresh eyes, that it might have worked out better. The question is, this is the second time that Nick Sirianni has promoted from within, and it's the second time that we've been really frustrated with the Eagles offense. I guess the question now becomes, were these decisions made, both offensive coordinators that he's promoted from within, were those decisions made because they were going to be yes men to Nick Sirianni? Does this speak to Sirianni's unwillingness to admit that maybe his offensive concepts aren't perfect? Is the reason that Kellen Moore was willing to go and take a bad job with the Saints rather than stick around for one more year and have a better selection of jobs, was that because of friction with Sirianni? I don't think it's that. I really think that that's just, there are a finite number of head coaching jobs available and you're going to jump on it. You don't want to go back to where you were, even though it was a Super Bowl win, you don't necessarily want to go back, see your stock fall, and then not have a head coaching opportunity the next offseason. But I think they're in a weird spot because if Sirianni just wanted to have a yes man as his offensive coordinator, well, this is kind of the result, right? There's nothing unique about the Eagles offense. As people are kind of doing the breakdowns of the right of AJ Brown, especially, there's nothing about this offense that stands out in stark contrast to what's being done in the league from an innovation standpoint. This just looks like a very basic bitch offense. I think that's what we should call it. We should call it the BBO, the basic bitch offense. That's what Kevin Patullo has this Eagles team running. Now, if we were to see that some route concepts have been updated over the last few weeks and that A.J. Brown is actually running more across the middle of the field where you would expect a guy of his size and speed and ability to find success, and Jalen Hurts isn't getting in the ball, well, then we have a different conversation. Then we do have look, they've made adjustments to the offensive game plan. The quarterback's not executing them. Well, then that's where it becomes fair to question the quarterback. But it looks like week over week, we're seeing a lot of the same concepts. Nothing is really changing. All right, let's go to Ford. Says hiring Kevin Patullo was dumb. Should have looked outside. Hopefully, Kellen Moore is enjoying being a head coach with the horrendous Saints. Yeah. Jim Grassa says the common denominator in all of this is that when we have an established offensive coordinator, we go to the Super Bowl. That is true. That is true. Joe Fisher says, Russ, what people aren't talking about is how many times Hurts has had a different offensive coordinator stay for more than 1 year, and what won and what his starting record so far is a winning one. So, okay, here's the thing about all of that. He hasn't had the same offensive coordinator 2 years in a row. I think the only guy who kind of qualified was Steichen, who was brought in partway through a season. and then had one full season as offensive coordinator. It's been like every year there's been a different OC, which is where I come back to that idea of how many of these seasons that Sirianni has been in control, how many of those seasons have been a heavy Nick Sirianni influence on the game plan, the methodology, and the philosophy of the offense, and how much autonomy have the offensive coordinators have to work within certain parameters? We don't know. We're not there. We're not part of the installation of a weekly game plan, right? The only people who would know how much influence and autonomy the offensive coordinators have are the offensive coordinator, probably the position coaches, and of course the head coach himself. Other than that, I don't think there are that many people who would have a realistic idea or a realistic answer. It's a problem, though. It is. All right. I'm good on that part. Now, I do want to bring up a quote that came out today, and this is honestly like just part of where this whole frustration came from today. Is I was kind of going around on Twitter earlier, and I saw that over on First Take, Dan Orlovsky had some pretty critical things to say about the Eagles offense. And most notably, he had some pretty critical things to say about whether or not the Eagles offense can get the job done. And look, I think a lot of the people on ESPN very clearly are not throwing shit against the wall to see what sticks, but I think there's definitely a belief out there that when you throw certain incendiary ideas out, it's going to catch fire. And so Dan Orlovsky went over on, I thought it was over on First Take. Maybe it was on NFL Live. He came out and said that he just doesn't see a scenario where this Eagles offense is good enough to win a back-to-back Super Bowl. And that is deeply concerning on a few levels. And I guess the question is going to be, going forward, what is the likelihood that the Eagles are actually able to get it done? And then that to me is a legit concern. So I'm going to go over to Orlovsky. This was from over on NFL Live. I thought it was on First Take, but it's on NFL Live. We're going to just throw over to this for, I don't know, a minute or so. And then we'll come back and reconvene. And then we'll probably move on to one of the other teams. But I usually like a lot of what Orlovsky has to say. I think he's relatively level-headed for a national media pundit. He very clearly believes that the Eagles have no shot of winning a Super Bowl, again, if this is the offense. Let's go over to Orlovsky.
I'm giggling because this pass offense is so much like Dallas's last year. I mean, Dallas's last year, I remember calling it the theme paper offense, where it's just straight lines.
Well, that's not great. Being compared to last year's Dallas offense is pretty damn bad.
That's kind of what this pass game is in Philly this year. No, this offense is not good enough to win the Super Bowl for a second straight year, okay?
Well, that's the damning line. Let's recap. Let's re-rack that.
Here. No, this offense is not good enough to win the Super Bowl for a second straight year, okay? It's the deadly combination of two. Yes.
Dan, let me ask you a question, bro. You've been in so many.
Now, at the risk of YouTube flagging this video and causing a lot of nightmares for me after the fact, they then dive into this idea of how hard is it to install certain concepts that you're not seeing. Bunch, groupings, pre-snap motion. That's not just doing it for the sake of having pre-snap motion. And Orlovsky essentially says, and you can find this over on Twitter, he essentially says that like it's not that complicated. It's not that hard to add to what you're already running. And these are professional players and they should be able to execute it. So if fans are looking at these concepts and they're looking at the route mapping at the end of a game of where A.J. Brown's routes were mostly on the outside and practically didn't run anything over the middle, if fans are able to see that, if pundits are able to look at everything and say, this isn't that complicated, this offense is too talented to have the limited success that they've had so far, it can't be that hard. Like something eventually has to give. I don't see Nick Sirianni making a change at offensive coordinator because, again, if the idea was Patullo's a yes man, he's not going to get rid of a guy that he brought up internally. It's also a bad look on the head coach if two of his last four internal hires or internal promotions have been total duds. It's not a good look for the head coach, even though he's had a ton of success to start his career, including the second Super Bowl in the history of the franchise. I don't know. Let me see real quick. Philly fan says you can say Orlovsky is running with this one right out of the back of the end zone, of course. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Jason Franklin says this makes it sound like Jalen has much input in the game plan. Well, I would assume that he's got some, but ultimately he's the one that executes it. So even if he doesn't agree with the concepts, I mean, he has the ability to call different things at the line. Will Griffin says, at least the Eagles have officially broken the Chiefs. I'm much more concerned about the tush push being broken. That was our bread and butter. It's a fair point. I mean, there was a 3rd and 1 call. We talked about this on Monday's show. There was a 3rd and 1 call against the Lions where they should have theoretically gone with the tush push, but because of injuries on the offensive line and seemingly a lack of confidence in that group, they didn't call tush push. They got stopped. I agree. That is a concern. If your surefire, no-brainer play is no longer as effective, it's a problem. Okay, I'm done with the Eagles for now. I'm done with them. We love the Eagles, but we're done with the Eagles for now. I want to get to a couple of other things. The Flyers, I guess we could jump over to the Flyers for a second. I'll be doing a lot of talking about them over on Snow the Goalie Radio tonight. But they are back in action on Thursday night taking on the Blues. Now, they didn't exactly have a barn burner of a good weekend. They only played one game. Played on Saturday. They got their doors blown off by the Dallas Stars 5-1. There's a legitimate concern that I have about the team right now. I have 2 concerns, kind of 3, but we'll say 2 for now. So one of the concerns is just in net. And the game against Dallas doesn't scare me from a Dan Vladar perspective. It wasn't his best performance, but I wouldn't say all 5 goals were on him. So you kind of zoom out and you go, all right, Vladar, he's allowed to have a not great start every once in a while, especially considering the fact that he's been pretty damn lights out this entire year. I mean, the only 2 games that I think you can point back to and say, oh, those weren't great. Was it a Saturday game against the Maple Leafs that he got pulled early in the 3rd period, and then he had this game against the Stars. On the season, though, Vladar is 6-4-1. He's got a 242 goals against, which is 8th in the league, and he still has a save percentage over 900. It's a 909 save percentage, which is 12th in the NHL. He's no longer at, number 2 and number 3 in each of those categories, but he's still a top half of the league, or top half of the starters in the league. So, you say that's still pretty good. The bigger concern that I have is with the guy who's his backup right now, Sam Ersson, because Sam Ersson has not looked good at all. Now, Ersson did get a shootout win against the Blues last week, but those numbers that he's put up so far have been horrifically bad. And kudos to him for being legitimately awesome in the shootout. But he's got a 3.3 goals against. That's 43rd in the league. He has an 846 save percentage. That's 51st in the league. He's 3-1-2 on the season. I don't have a whole lot to go off with Sam Ersson to instill some kind of confidence. But let's just take a goosey gander at his last 5 games in between the pipes for the Flyers. All right. Played against Winnipeg at home, lost 5-2. Played at home against the Islanders. They won 4-3 in a shootout, so 3 goals allowed. They won a shootout 3-2 at home against the Penguins, so you'll notice that shootouts are a big part of this. They lost 3-2 in overtime at home against the Senators, and then, of course, they won 6-5 in a shootout against the Blues. And you can look at that on the surface and say, all right, the goals against aren't that bad, right? There's a couple of 3-goal allowed games. There's one that you only allowed 2. And yeah, there's a 4 and there's a 5. Here's the problem. To this point in the season, Sam Ersson hasn't done anything to inspire any confidence that backup position is solid. And one of the things that I've been saying since the start of the year is Dan Vladar, being as exceptional as he's been, is great, but it kind of covers up some of the imperfections on the team. Makeup would maybe be a good comparison here, right? You got a bad pimple, maybe you put a little bit of concealer or whatever, a little bit of cover up on there. I don't know all the terms, right? I'm just a dumb guy. I don't know. But you could put a little bit of something over a really nasty zit. And if nobody's looking super, super close at your face, you might not notice it. Maybe you got some wrinkles on your forehead. You put a little bit of toner on there, kind of tighten it up a little bit. That's all fine. But when you wake up in the morning, those wrinkles are there. When you wake up in the morning, that zit is still there. And you know what? If you scratch that zit and spread all of that nastiness into other pores on your face, guess what? high likelihood that you're going to get more of those ugly zits. Chances are, if you're stressed out and your life is kind of chaotic, more of those wrinkles are going to start to appear. You can put makeup on each of these little imperfections, and for a while, it'll kind of work. It all comes out in the wash. 3-1-2 as a backup isn't the worst thing in the world. He gets wins in shootouts. He's 3 shootout wins this year. All 3 of his wins have been in shootouts. But it's the rest of the time that the problems really come to a head. No pun intended, but kind of. See, the Sam Ersson problem as the backup netminder for the Flyers is like a Mount Vesuvius level pimple that's about to land right between the eyes before the biggest date of his life. That's what Sam Ersson's season has been so far. And we can even go back to last year, where the groin injuries sent him to injured reserve multiple times and led to a weird 3-goalie rotation. The Sam Ersson problem is a legitimate Mount Vesuvius level pimple that's getting ready to come to an head. And at some point, it will fully come to a head for the Flyers. So far, they've been able to put a little concealer. Oh, a shootout. Sam Ersson's okay in the shootout. He has 3 wins in the shootout. You put a little bit here. Oh, Dan Vladar was in the top 5 in goals against the save percentage for a good chunk of the season. All right, that's putting a little bit of toner, tightening up those wrinkles. Eventually, this will come to a head. And the question that the Flyers are going to have to answer is, how long are they willing to roll the dice that Sam Ersson is the right guy to be the backup? We could actually have an honest conversation about, is Dan Vladar really the guy that you want to envision being the number 1? It's always hard to say because goalies are very complicated creatures, right? Goalies are so freaking unpredictable. You never really know what you're going to get from one. And you never really know when a guy's going to hit his peak performance. And at this point, Ersson is 26 and Vladar is 28. You can look at Vladar and say, hey, could this be a really good stopgap guy that can give us, starting quality performance, maybe not top 5, maybe not top 10, but like a really solid starter? He might be. Remember, the most games he's played in a single season so far has been 30 games. He's at 11 so far this year. So it's probably fair to wonder, can you really put all the eggs in the basket of Dan Vladar being the number 1 guy? So far, he's looked good enough that I think you could say, yeah, at least for now, small sample size, he's looked pretty damn good. But the backup shouldn't be the problem. Like in reality, they thought Ersson was going to be the starter and Vladar was going to be a really good backup. Maybe give you 30 games. Maybe be able to be a guy that you lean on in some high leverage games like he was with Calgary. But right now they have the guy that was supposed to be the backup as the starter. And now the guy that was supposed to be the starter is underperforming as a backup. And the problem is, it's not like Sam Ersson has games where you say, that goal's not on him. None of the goals are on him. No, like virtually every game, there's 1 or 2 goals that Sam Ersson allows that you go, he needed to have that. And here's the bigger thing. Even if you get to the end of a game and you say, well, it's not all on Sam Ersson. There's one part of this that I just fundamentally cannot understand. There are times where you need a goalie to make a save to bail you out. Vladar has done it this year. Vladar has had moments in games where he pulls an incredible save out of nowhere and bailed out his team, who turns over the puck in their own zone. And Vladar has made that save, looking like a number 1 netminder. It feels like virtually every time the Flyers make a mistake in front of Sam Ersson, it ends up in the back of the net. So my question once again is, at what point do the Flyers say enough is enough? Now, I don't know. Could there be another team in the league that would be interested in trading for him? Maybe. He's an RFA at the end of the year. Could a change of scenery thing be a good idea? Maybe. Do they really want to go to Alexei Kolosov now? I can't imagine they do. They certainly don't want to bring Bjarnason up. Are they going to go explore the trade market for a more reliable backup? Would they instead look at it and say, we like what Dan Vladar has given us, but we don't think that he's going to be able to hold up to a starter's load, and look for a starting goalie in the middle of a season? And what team is going to be willing to trade a starting netminder to your team now? Like, I don't see it. So all of this is to say, there are a lot of concerns that I've got right now with that situation in net. But then again, this is the Philadelphia Flyers, and you expect it. We can also kind of take a look at it and say, at 9-6-3, they are .500. I don't like to look at overtime losses or shootout losses and say,
well, they don't count the same because you got the extra 5 minutes of time, that extra time beyond the 60. So we're going to give that a different percentage.
No, you're 9-9. You've won 9 games. You've lost 9 games. They're hockey .500. That's fine. That doesn't even bother me. I didn't have ridiculously high expectations for the team. I said, I think all along, Their plan was to try to make the playoffs, be a bubble playoff team. They seem very well on their way to potentially being that. But they're going to have to address the goalie situation soon. I cannot envision a scenario where if Sam Ersson goes out and has a couple more of these games where he's allowing 4 or 5 goals and a couple of them are softies and he's not making that save to keep the team in a game, they're going to have to consider a move. Again, will it be Kolosov? I don't know. I think they like what they've gotten out of Kolosov and Bjarnason as a duo with the Phantoms. And I would expect that next year, their plan is to probably go with some combination of Vladar and Kolosov at the NHL level. That's my guess. So this is kind of like you're trying to stem the tide. You're trying to kind of tread water from now into next season. But we'll see. I honestly don't know how it's going to play out. But I'm interested to know if people are, on the same wavelength as me. So we'll go out real quick to the comments. Philly fan says, Ersson is cooked. Prop him up for a trade to a team at the deadline. When their goalie gets hurt, call up Kolosov and be done with it. Yeah, I mean, I guess the urgency of if there's another team that loses their starter, maybe the Flyers can try to, I don't know, maybe they could try to put together something that looks like I don't know. This guy was once a starter. We really did believe in him. I don't know. I don't see it. Amadeo asks, is it wrong that I'm not excited to watch the Flyers at all? I would say that that's not as much on the goalie. I think it's much more on the fact that the Flyers don't put enough pucks on net and that it's a boring team to watch right now, which I want to come back to in a second. Jay Grubby says, same, Amadeo, the only team I really follow religiously anymore too. Yeah, it kind of stinks. We could talk about that in a second. Fawcett says the only entertaining part of most Flyers home games is to know the goalie. Thank you. Thank you. Will Griffin says, as long as we drag, keyword drag, Ersson to the shootout, it's an automatic win. Once he starts losing those, he'll have zero value. At least his stats keep us invested, or his starts keep us invested. Tips line got the only goal on Saturday. I got to give Will Griffin credit because I shouted out Will Griffin's comment and said it was kind of unhinged the other day. Will Griffin was in here the next show saying great show at the end. Will Griffin's here. Will Griffin, you're good peeps. No, he's right though. If they start getting to shootouts and Ersson starts losing them, then yeah, you're gonna hate. There's gonna be a lot of hate for Sam Ersson beyond what the typical disdain might be right now. Michael, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kelly. I mean, we're going by the Italian here. Mr. Kelly says firing Torts is not the problem. It's who replaced them. Okay. So the idea that firing Torts is, I don't know what okay. Let me kind of unpack all of this. Tortorella is an issue. That is as far as it has to go. Tortorella was an issue and was a malcontent by the end. And also had words with Cam York that you probably shouldn't have as a coach of a team. Torts ran his captain into the ground and then kind of humiliated him. Torts lost the locker room. That's it. Right. So like there wasn't a scenario where Torts was going to continue to coach here for 3-4 more years. And it was going to be like rainbows and smiles, or that you were going to get a Stanley Cup contending team. Was the Tocchet hiring the right one? Well, if you go back to episodes from the end of last year through his actual hiring, you can find a lot of episodes where I was like, this isn't a very inspiring hire. And like, there were concerns. There was the Elias Pettersson concern about him going from being like a legitimate, like 100-point player to not that. There were issues with the locker room in Vancouver. And so then you start to wonder, are those kind of issues a systemic thing? Are they tied specifically to that organization? Are they a Rick Tocchet problem? I'm not ready to say that they're a Rick Tocchet problem. What I will tell you is that like Tocchet's team here is playing similarly to Tocchet's team in Vancouver, which I believe played pretty similarly to Tocchet's team in Arizona. Like I'm not convinced at this point that you're ever going to see a Rick Tocchet team that's going to put 30 shots on goal and is going to be a joy to watch. I think you're going to watch a team that in theory is a strong defensive team that is going to still cycle the puck better than I think Torts' team did, at least on the power play. And they're going to be a team that pounces on opportunities and mistakes and ends up winning a good number of games, but maybe doesn't become a powerhouse in the conference. Now that could change. It really could. And Tocchet had an incredibly great season. Was it 2 years ago with Vancouver? Like, they can reach some pretty cool heights. But the question is going to be whether or not Tocchet's the right guy with this set of players. And right now, I would say that, like, on the whole, you've seen Tyson Forster, when he's healthy, take some significant steps forward. You've seen Drysdale take some significant steps forward. I wonder how much of that kind of comes back to Bradshaw last year, and maybe kind of getting his head back on, right? But Drysdale's looked better. York has looked better. We continue to talk about how Sanheim looks like an actual number one pairing, not a number one overall defenseman, but like a top pairing defenseman. I would make the case that this team on the whole is still heading in the right direction. Mishkov's minutes have been a point of conversation. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's fair criticism. It doesn't mean it's unfair criticism. We're still only 18 games into the season. If 40 games into the season, Matvei Mishkov is barely getting like third line minutes, or is like one of the 4 or 5 fewest played guys, fewest played forwards in terms of minutes, well, that'll be concerning. Unless the Flyers are just on the penalty kill a ton, which obviously means they won't win a lot of games. We can maybe come back to it. Let's say like the 30 game mark. Let's see how things are kind of trending. I'm not ready to say that it was a terrible hire. I think it's been an okay hire. It hasn't blown the doors off anyone. I also don't know anybody who thought that this team was going to be, roughly 500 at 9-6-3. All right. Let's see. There's more over here. Philly fan says Carter Hart wanted a fresh start, but nothing is stopping the Flyers trading for him and saying, how's that fresh start? Welcome back. Yeah, there is. I mean, there are a lot of things that are stopping that from happening. He didn't want to play here. He didn't want to come back here. And like, I will say this. This is the thing that is still mind-blowing to me, is that there were people in the organization who wanted to bring him back and didn't seem to think that there would be a big enough public blowback that it would have been problematic for the organization. I mean, if they had brought him back, it was just opening Pandora's box. It's a good thing that he moved on, and he will probably find a good amount of success with Vegas. But he ain't coming back here. They ain't trading for him. It ain't happening. Chris Freed says the Flyers of 2025 remind me of Gabe Kapler's first season with the Phillies, just without the coconut oil. Yeah, I don't think Tocchet would want to wear a cheetah Speedo and douse himself in baby oil either, or coconut oil. Let's see. Will asks, is Kolosov better than Ersson? Legitimate question. I feel like we have 2 B and 1 C goalie. By the way, as a Penn State fan, I'm all for the tank to go get McKenna. Let me take the second part of that first. McKenna has not looked like a generational guy at Penn State yet. It doesn't mean that he won't be. It's just wild to me that like going into the season, people were talking about him on the same line as like Connor McDavid, or about like a Sidney Crosby being a generational prospect. So far at Penn State, he's been good. Sometimes he's been very good, but he hasn't looked like the bona fide number 1 stud and generational talent that people have hyped him up to be. They're also not going to go in the tank intentionally to go get McKenna. Is Kolosov better than Ersson? I don't know. I think we'll have a better idea of what Kolosov is if he gets to stay virtually the entire season with the Phantoms and then comes up next year. And again, I think that is their intent as an organization, is Kolosov plays his full year at the Phantoms, provides some decent shielding, right, for Bjarnason. Kolosov goes up next year. Bjarnason takes over as the starting goalie of the Phantoms in 26-27. And then Kolosov and Vladar battle it out for the top spot, the top number 1 job in net, unless some unbelievable talent becomes available on the trade market, and then, let the chips fall where they may. Okay, I think Jay Grubby says Snowden's Phantoms are a joy to watch. Here's like the weird thing, I guess, right? Snowden and Tocchet are in constant communication, apparently, or enough communication. And like one of the things that we talked about on the Press Row show a week or 2 ago, I think with Jackie Spiegel, was that they're trying to pass a lot of like what's expected at the NHL level to the AHL, and how in the past when Lappy was at the AHL and Torts was at the NHL level, that they weren't playing the same system and the points of emphasis weren't the same. And so when a guy would get called up from the Phantoms, he wouldn't know what the hell to expect. Whereas now they're trying to make that transition back and forth a lot easier on these guys. And I think it seems to be working so far. Jay Grubby says, if they end up moving Mishkov to solve their winger jam because he isn't a Tocchet style player, that would be the worst possible outcome. They're not trading Mishkov. They're not. I don't see any chance of that happening ever. Philly fan says, bump Barkey and Martone. There's still a lot of fat to cut away from this team. They seem to be high on where Bump is at. And it seems like Snowden has gotten through to Bump, and Bump has been on a heater recently. There are people in the organization that believe Barkey's played really well. And then, of course, you have Porter Martone tearing it up in college and like very much is expected to be a game changer for this team when he comes up to the NHL level. There are going to be tough decisions to be made. I think everybody knows where I'm at on Owen Tippett. I just don't think that he fits here from a personnel perspective. I just do not see a scenario where it makes a lot of sense for him to be a long-term piece of this puzzle. I don't think they're going to move on from Brink or Forster. So you're left with like very few options of who you're going to move. I continue to kind of wonder where they're at with Konechny right now. I still think that there are a lot of teams in this league that would happily make a move for Konechny, and then as the cap goes up, an $8.25 million cap hit or whatever it is for a guy that brings what Konechny brings to the table, potential 30-ish, 35 goal upside. I'd like to see it be a little bit higher, but 30, 35 goal upside. A guy who can get under the skin of the opponents, a guy who's like a pretty decent playmaker, can get you 75 points maybe. Like, is that kind of fair? Maybe like a 75 point kind of average. If he's on a better team, I think you'd see higher point totals than where he's been at for his career. Are there teams that would be interested in that? I would say probably. His highest point total to this point is 76 last year in 82 games. I think that on a better team, Konechny is probably a very consistent 70-plus point performer. That's my guess. Maybe he goes higher. I don't know. He hasn't played on great teams in Philadelphia. So it's kind of tricky to put all the way out there. But like, Konechny, I think, would have interest on the trade market. I think Tippett would too. Obviously, a Forster and a Brink would have interest as well. I just don't see the Flyers moving off from those guys. So that's where it gets really tricky. Amadeo says they never should have extended Konechny. I had a lot to say about the potential AAV and the potential term when that contract came out. I don't think that it's done a lot to help. Now, Philly fans interesting here with Phillies padding Dvorak's stats to probably be the best center available at the trade deadline, like the Islanders did last year for Nelson. So if the Flyers were to get to a point where they feel like Zegras could be a responsible 200-foot player at center, well, then that does kind of free up a spot in the lineup because you move Zegras back to center. Dvorak, maybe you would trade at the deadline. And if you did that, that would open up a spot for a bump. Or maybe at the end of the year, depending on how things go in college, could a Porter Martone make the playoff roster for this team if they are in a legitimate playoff hunt, or if they do end up qualifying for the playoffs? I don't know. We'll find out. All right. I've gotten really bogged down in this Flyer stuff. I wanted to get over to a little bit of Paul George really quick, and then we have to talk very briefly about the union scandal before we get into it a lot more on Friday. But Paul George showed up, played in his first game all season for the Sixers against his former team, the Clippers. And like, he didn't light the world on fire, right? It was a perfectly fine first game. He ended up putting in 21 minutes of work for the Sixers, had 9 points, 7 rebounds, shot, I think it was 1 of 4, if I remember correctly, from downtown. Didn't have a great shooting night. 9 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks. Was kind of involved pretty well. Didn't feel wildly out of place. I will come back to the same thing that I said on Monday, in that, like, there's a scenario here where as the season goes on, if his body reacts well and he's able to be in the lineup pretty consistently, it will be a very valuable thing for the Sixers to have a guy that can handle the ball as well as he can in that position, and to take a little bit of the pressure off of Tyrese Maxey and eventually some of the pressure off of VJ Edgecombe. If Jared McCain ever regains his form, which Jared McCain does not look right, off of Quentin Grimes, like, would it be helpful to have another good ball handler and somebody who can slash to the rim? Like we still expect Paul George to be able to do at this point in his career. Yeah, it'll help. Can he be a guy that like is routinely shooting under 30% from three and make this whole thing work? No, that'll have to get better. But it was one game. Here's the actual concern that I have, though. So they played on Monday night. It's now Wednesday. Paul George is out of the lineup tonight. He will not play tonight for the Sixers, which I find like pretty deeply concerning because why? Like, he played 21 minutes on Monday night. It's not a back-to-back. Why is he not playing tonight? Did his body not react well to a 21-minute performance? Like, he said after the game on Monday, he felt rusty but felt good. And what we had heard for a few weeks is that Paul George looked good in practice. So, like does all this make sense? If he's been practicing with the team full bore for weeks, he finally gets into a game, he plays 21 minutes, and he can't play in a game 2 days later. Isn't that a concern? Like, I think that's a concern. To quote Ford, how the hell is PG already out? I don't know. I'm not sure why he's not playing. I have no clue. So he's out of the lineup tonight. And surprise, surprise, Joel Embiid is out tonight. So not ideal. Like, there you go. We had the Jared McCain injury, the UCL issue following the meniscus surgery. Kelly Oubre is out. Joel Embiid is just out. And now Paul George, 2 days after making his season debut, is out. That is legitimately an issue, and I don't fully understand why this is happening. It is not a back-to-back. Fisher says Ford, they say he, like Embiid, will not play back-to-backs, except it wasn't. He played on Monday. They had an entire, they didn't have a game yesterday. I don't fully understand why he's not in the lineup tonight. I find that concerning. And obviously it's going to be a bigger concern long-term if not only do you not have a consistent Joel Embiid, but you also can't have a relatively consistent Paul George. But we'll come back around to that at some point. Now, the last thing I wanted to get to today is the scandal around the Philadelphia Union, and it is bad, very bad. So there was a report that came out about Ernst Tanner, the sporting director of the Philadelphia Union. And obviously, the Union have a really big week ahead of them. On Sunday, for the first time in 22 days or whatever, they're going to play an MLS playoff game after they dispatched the Chicago Fire in 2 games. They're finally going to take the field again against NYCFC. And this should be a game that gets you really excited. This should be a game that really does matter for the Philadelphia Union. It should be the main focus weeks after they played their last game in the playoffs. And yet, that's not the big focus. The big focus is on the sporting director, Ernst Tanner. The Guardian put out a story about Ernst Tanner's, I'll just show you the story. It was, Pablo Maurer, right? Pablo Iglesias Maurer put this out. I believe this came out last night. Came out Tuesday, late afternoon. This is the story, and it's got a pretty damning headline. MLS executive who built a powerhouse faced allegations of sexist, racist, and homophobic behavior. He denied the allegations, which prompted a recently concluded MLS investigation that could not corroborate them. Now, this is a very long story, and there are a lot of things in the story, including something I just had to pull off because it was a quote that he allegedly said about a referee touching one of his players a few years ago, threw out a homophobic slur that they claimed 20-plus fans heard him say. There were comments in here about him potentially saying demeaning things about female referees. There were things about comments that were made about people being subhuman potentially, or being not at the same level intelligence-wise based on their race. Not good stuff. Not good stuff at all. Now, MLS investigated. He was essentially cleared. As that subheadline says, MLS could not corroborate the claims. So this story breaks last night, and you go, all right, well, the investigation's over. So clearly, whether there was some truth to it or not, the thing is over, and now you just kind of say, all right, time to move on. Except nay. Because today, Major League Soccer put out a statement in which they said they are reopening the investigation. So this report by The Guardian was so damning that apparently the decision makers at Major League Soccer have reopened the investigation. The statement from MLS reads as follows, or from the Philadelphia Union. The Philadelphia Union takes all allegations of misconduct extremely seriously and is committed to maintaining a safe, respectful, and inclusive environment for everyone associated with our club. Discrimination, harassment, or abusive conduct of any kind has no place here, and all staff are required to complete annual sensitivity training. While a recent MLS investigation was unable to corroborate allegations involving sporting director Ernst Tanner, MLS has advised the union that it will be reopening the investigation, and the union continues to cooperate fully. The union has placed Mr. Tanner on administrative leave during the investigation. Throughout this process, our top priority remains the well-being of our players, fans, staff, and community. And so the union put out that big statement, right? So again, there are accusations of homophobic slurs, misogyny, about female officials, racial stereotypes. Some of that was also about officials as well. There was the thing about how he hired a coach at Union 2 who was unqualified and who essentially seems to have been verbally abusive to players, that maybe he carried himself with an air of arrogance and that was off-putting to coworkers. So you put all this together and you go, all right, how bad is it? Is this going to lead to Ernst Tanner being removed as the sporting director of the Philadelphia Union? And one of the things that MLS kind of put out in their own statement is that there were people who were approached in the first investigation. Many of them decided to participate either anonymously or not. And that those people in the midst of that investigation, they couldn't corroborate the accusations. MLS put out a statement today saying that they're going to maintain an anonymous reporting hotline and encourage anyone with relevant information to come forward. Now, the Philadelphia Union are in the midst of a playoff run. If there's ever a time, I guess, for the sporting director to get placed on leave, now is about as good of a time as any. Now, do we here at the Russ Joy Show condone misogyny, sexism, or racism? We do not. Did I hit all three? Let's see. Racism, sexism, and homophobic slurs. That was the other one. No. Do we condemn Ernst Tanner right now, coming off of an investigation where they couldn't corroborate the claims? Well, no, I don't know what you do. If the league looks into it, I think it's probably safe to say that some of the accusations could have been true. They very well may have. But if the league cleared him, and now you get additional reporting that, what this seems, and I could be wrong, so take this with a grain of salt. There were people who alleged things. Major League Soccer looked into it. Major League Soccer said, can't corroborate it. Case closed. Ernst Tanner's fine. You could stay in your position with the Philadelphia Union. Seemingly, somebody or somebodies who might have made claims against Ernst Tanner were unhappy with that. Then they spoke out to this reporter who presumably also had other sources speak. Maybe one of the people who had made an allegation also came forward to that reporter and put other things out there, because Major League Soccer essentially said that there were more accusations that came forward. And so now they're trying to parse what's true, what's not, and they're reopening the investigation. I guess the question is going to be, if Major League Soccer does this again, and they still are unable to corroborate the accusations, will there be another report to come weeks from now? And will they reopen the investigation again? At what point does the league say, we investigated this, it's from our perspective, it's done? Now, to their credit, if there are legitimate issues, and there was one of the things we didn't touch on here, is that apparently there was a apparently inappropriate contact with a coworker. I think they said grabbed the butt of a coworker. You certainly cannot do that. You certainly cannot. And if that got reported to HR and wasn't handled, then that's shame on the Philadelphia Union for not following up. All of this is to say, it feels like a lot more information is going to come out between now and Friday. Friday, the goal is to have somebody on who's covering the team a lot more closely. And by then we'll have even more information to go off of. But for right now, it is a shame from a macro perspective that if you're a Philadelphia Union fan, your team's about to be in the conference semifinal. And instead of being able to focus on that, you have this very awful black cloud looming over the organization. And again, I will be fair. This is a thing that, if it is proven to be true, is a horrible black eye on this organization. And I would even make the argument it's probably a pretty big black eye for the league itself if they were able to clear this guy. And now it looks like they maybe shouldn't have, right? will I compare this exactly to what happened in the NBA with the gambling scandal where they cleared a couple of guys only for the FBI to turn around and say, nay, shouldn't have been cleared. Here are some additional facts that you were unaware of. And now we as the feds are able to bring to the forefront. I don't know. I don't know if it's totally fair to make that one-for-one comparison, but it doesn't look good on the league if you cleared the guy and now you're reopening it again based on this report. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Ultimately, if these things are proven to be true and are corroborated, well, then you're probably looking at Ernst Tanner getting let go by the Philadelphia Union, which from a, is that the fair thing to do? Is that the right thing to do? If all these accusations are true, yeah, there's no place for any of it. I will also note that, this guy might be the best executive in the entire league. He certainly is the best executive the Philadelphia Union have ever had. And so if this ends up turning out to be true and he gets let go and it's found that that is the right thing to do, that puts a massive hole, by the way, in the Philadelphia Union's building of a team. Ernst Tanner, if we just set all, I know it's hard, if we set all of these accusations aside and we just evaluate him on the professional quality of being able to build a team, he has been able to build a team that has been a Supporter Shield winner twice, has been able to build a team that might actually get back to MLS Cup again for the second time in a few years. And he's done it with little to no financial support relative to other teams in the league. And that is a commendable accomplishment. And at the same time, if he's done that while also being potentially misogynistic, racist, and homophobic, it's not great. It's not great at all. You don't put those things on the scale and say, they kind of balance out. He's such a good executive. You can't. So we'll see over the next couple of days what truth comes to light. We'll see what this new investigation finds in the next couple of days. And again, we should have somebody here on Friday who covers the Philadelphia Union to talk about it. So we will see. Connor Buss says he let the power get to his head ultimately. Might get cleared again if they can't corroborate the stories, but either way, the Union should fire him. I don't think if they can't corroborate it, I don't think the Philadelphia Union are going to fire him. I really don't. I don't think it'll happen. I think they're going to look at it and say, this guy's too damn good. But I could be wrong. Amadeo says, it's not a Philly team without drama. That is correct. And Connor says, the fact that so many accusations are there and it's being reopened is not good. As he is, as good as he is, I'd rather he leave or be fired. We'll see what ends up happening. So, again, we will touch on that topic again on Friday. Until then, this has been the Russ Joy Show. I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. Don't forget, tonight, Wednesday night, depending on when you're watching this or listening to it, Wednesday night, 6 o'clock at Chickies and Pete's on Roosevelt Boulevard in Northeast Philly. We're doing Snow the Goalie Radio from 6 to 7. That'll also stream on all the Snow the Goalie platforms. So if you want to come talk puck, come out to Chickies and Pete's. Let's talk some puck. You can give us a call over on the radio as well. If not, we'll be back also on the Snow the Goalie channels on Thursday night for Flyers, Blues, the Press Row Show. You check that out. For the purposes of this show, however, I will be back on Friday. We will dive into all of the biggest stories in Philadelphia. So a big thank you to each and every one of you who tuned into the show. A big thank you to all of you who were in the comments section today. There were many of you today, and I want to thank you all for joining me on Facebook, X, and YouTube. If you like the podcast feed and you like listening to podcasts better, good news. You can tune in after the fact over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. So again, until Friday, this has been the Russ Joy Show, and I've been Russ Joy. But you knew that already because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. Have a wonderful Wednesday, and I will talk to all of you Friday here on the Russ Joy Show.